Welcome to this very special episode of Menopause Conversations. My name is Amantha King. I'm a workplace menopause consultant and I'm an executive performance coach. And I have honestly the biggest delight today to introduce you to Dr Nighat Arif. Hello, Nighat. How are you?
Hey, Amantha. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, I'm absolutely thrilled. I was just laughing. I was showing Nighat her book, colour-coded to match my scarf. I mean, that wasn't intentional, by the way, but this is in the top 3 of my books. This is my top book for menopause in terms of our work list and our corporate list that we have. And I just really am so thrilled to have Dr. Nighat here, because we're going to actually talk about her book, The Knowledge, and we're going to talk about some things that maybe you haven't heard her talk about in terms of the context of this wonderful book. So Nighat, can you just give us, because you'll do it so much better than I will, could you give us an introduction to yourself, who you are and what it is you do, apart from writing great books?
Honestly, seeing the colour tabs has made my heart sing. That's exactly what I want people to do, because it's a lay book. It's a book written in very simple languages, simple language, and it's so that you can put tabs in there and make reference points and come back to it. It's not one that you sit down and read cover to cover. So hello, everybody on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Dr Nighat. I'm an NHS GP in Buckinghamshire of about, gosh, this is 16 years of experience, about 10 years of experience as a GP with a specialist interest in women's health. And I also run my own private practice as well. I'm the resident doctor on BBC Breakfast and ITV's This Morning. I am also the recipient of the Point of Light Award from the Prime Minister for my work around women's health. I'm the ambassador for Wellbeing of Women and also headed up the Collective, which is a group of marginalised communities which have mapped over the last 2 years, who are formulating, and we're learning from them in regards to what works and the trust that they've built within their community, so that we can incorporate that into clinical pathways for the women's health strategy. I'm also an Honorary Doctorate at the City University of London for public health and women's health as well, because of my work with Team Halo, which was backed by United Nations, so by the UN, in the pandemic as well. And I would say, out of all of that, the most important job is I'm the 2 boys. And that is something that is honestly the biggest juggle, being a mother, a working mother, and also doing work at a national level. But it's a thrill and it's a joy. And having contemporaries such as you, Amantha, look at my work was actually my biggest fear. People who are immersed in menopause, immersed in women's health, coming across my book. And in fact, I shouldn't have been scared, because the biggest advocates of my work has been Professor Dame Leslie Regan, who's the ambassador for women's health, Professor Joyce Harper, who we both know as well, and Dr Rani Thakur, who's the president of the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and a whole load of other colleagues who've now read my book, looked at it, absorbed it, and hopefully using it in their clinical settings with their patients up and down the UK in their surgeries.
Honestly, it's absolutely, I love it. I really love it. And I've got lots of menopause books here, which I think are good books. But what I love about this is it's so visual. I've actually tabbed up some pictures. So thank you for actually explaining that. But I mean, I just love, the illustrations alone, I want to show people, are just stunning. And I can hear you reading it to me. I know that's going to sound ridiculous, but I can hear your voice. And I think those are the types of books that can really, really draw us in. And we were just talking a little bit offline there, but we're going to sort of get into it now, in that actually, I'm a mum of a soon-to-be 18-year-old young woman who is, really sort of flourishing as an individual. She's probably going to go off to university next year. And one of the things that concerned me most is actually the whole peer group orientation of, I'm a child of the 1970s. If I wanted to go and find something, I'd have to go and find that Reader's Digest book that we all had in our house, where we'd self-diagnose. You think you have a headache, and then by the end of finishing, you think you'd have a tumor in your head. But I wanted something for my daughter that wasn't me imposing information on her, but that was something credible, that within her friendship group, she could be that person who could say, actually, I think what you're saying is not true, and be that sort of pillar of light, really, for people. And you talk about that in your book, about people being that pillar of light and passing on that information. And so one of the things I wanted to really ask you is, in terms of the book, you know, when we think about young people, what are the difficulties that young people are up against when it comes to getting good quality information? For example, you know, the section here, let's start, you know, it's sort of early days, you know, when young people are starting to notice those characteristics about their body changing, their breasts changing, you know, noticing body odor, things like this. I mean, how do people even begin to navigate that? And you know, with your book, can you talk us through that?
When I sat down to write my book, it's really sweet that you said that it's my voice, because that was done on purpose. I didn't want this to be a medical book where you have lots of jargon. I on purpose had a lay editor, although that's diminishing her role, because she was absolutely fantastic. Pauline just edits lots of cookbooks, actually. And so this first medical book, and I wanted her to come back to me consistently and say, this is too much medical jargon. And so I sort of not dumbed it down, but I got it right down to the common denominator. And the reason is because I want 12-year-olds all the way up to 100-year-old to be able to access this with the men in their life. And it's because it's what is true to what I see in my clinical surgery. I'm a jobbing GP, and I have been for many, many years. And always I thought to myself, I would love to write a book which is actually accurate in clinical knowledge, but also because none of us are a scientific textbook walking around. And so put that down so that women of color, women of different sizes, women of different shapes, with the men in their lives, can sit down and have a conversation so that we're not walking around in silos. What's happened with a lot of Gen Z, and I would say even the millennials that I'm talking to in my surgeries, is that they've all almost had to parent themselves, because one of the things that I think has caused a real vast in knowledge, over knowledge, is social media. Now I'm plugged into social media. I make health content creation on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, and also LinkedIn. That's how I know that you came across some of my work. And the difficulty we have is that when you've got young adults who are like, well, I'll Google this, or I'll go on TikTok, or I'll just have a look at YouTube, you can be given a whole myriad of information. And sometimes you do need an adult who's got that lived in experience, you know, the university of life, to say, actually, let me just correct that information. So the biggest thing I get is, well, I'm going to have sex with my partner, I'm 17 years old, and I'll go on the pill, the combined oral contraceptive pill, but not think about things like condoms for sexually transmitted diseases, because you almost need an adult to give that safety aspect. But also in amongst that, you need to be thinking about the emotional connection. It's not just the physical act of having intercourse, but the emotional aspect, the gaslighting that might happen, the coercion, unfortunately, that can happen, which we know that if you're young and vulnerable, can be even more so. And that sometimes is something I can draw upon in my clinical consultation. What we've got now, Amantha, is a division in regards to the generations. We've got the older generation who are sort of quite embarrassed that women are sexual beings, and I think that taboo and shame is still there. Then we've got women who are in their midlife, in their 40s, who find that because of access to information that their youngsters have, their role to educate has almost been taken off them, whether they like it or not. But also the women are trying to, in their midlife, provide that cushion of, say, emotional stability, because what they're trying to battle with is the mental health of their teenage daughters and sons. And not only are we now in that midlife where we're the sandwich generation looking after our older individuals, but we're also looking after the mental well-being, because physically they're fine, they're healthy, they've got access to food, they've got good nutrition, they're able to, so physically they're okay, but the mental health load is something that we are really picking up. And what I wanted to do with this book is to be able to just provide a very softly, gently to say, no, this is the correct evidence-based, nice guidance in lay form that you can relay as 3 generations, the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter at home.
Exactly. And I love that, because again, we were sort of talking, you know, my mum's Sri Lankan, and I've grown up, you know, with that rich cultural sort of variance. I know you have too, but this wasn't something my mum would be speaking to me about. And so my frame of reference, I'm going to put my hands up and say, do you know what? Do you know what I was doing this morning with the tape measure? I was looking at the page around actually knowing your right bra size.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say, Nighat, I did not know how to do that properly.
Yeah.
Hands up, right? And anyone who's looking going, oh my God, she didn't know. Yes, I didn't know. And I have been and had my measurement done at well-known department stores, but I didn't know. I probably have been wearing the wrong bras all my life, and making it up as I go along. So of course, the first thing I said to my own daughter was, actually, I think we need to check that we're doing things properly for you. And you know, my mum wouldn't have known. Even if she did know, she wouldn't have necessarily seen it as her role to be educating me in these things. I think she probably thought it would just happen by osmosis, like it did for her. But you know, one of the most wonderful things that you just said there, and I do feel very strongly about this, I think because a lot of us are having children later in life. I was 34 when I had my daughter. You know, I have been perimenopausal ever since she was 2. And so I'm still perimenopausal now. So that's 16 years of my child's nearly 18 years of life. That's all she's ever known about me. And I'm pretty sure at some points that must terrify her, because she's seen me at my absolute worst. And another sort of motivation for me buying this book is I don't want her to be fearful of that. She sees me now flourishing, probably in the last couple of years, but I would want her to see that that's normal. And my mum's response to it also was an interesting one, which is, you know, my mum's very proud of me and everything I've done within my career in the pharmaceutical industry. But actually, my mum was a little bit surprised, if I'm honest, that, you know, she said to me one day, she said, "Darling, why do you want to talk about that?" You know, as if it was something, you know, that's me impersonating my mum, and I do that all the time, because, you know, anyone who comes from a South Asian sort of heritage knows that actually so much of what we hear is, you know, ridiculous some of the times. But actually, my mum now sees that she was a nurse going to night duty, Nighat, flooding at night on the wards, and actually literally putting a coat round her and still carrying on, keeping calm and carrying on. My mum didn't have the help that she could have had, probably, to stay in that profession longer. So you're absolutely right. So the mental health thing is a real worry, isn't it? Because this is where probably people aren't giving enough self-care to themselves, not really knowing what they should do. And some of the things I absolutely love in here, well, I love all of it, but particularly when you talk about periods, I mean, knowing about the flow of periods, looking at discharge, there, I've said it. So I mean, how important is all of that, particularly with young people, knowing their secretions, knowing their intimate areas? I mean, we don't do enough of that, right? I mean, I know we have sexual health education at school. Is it going far enough, do you think?
I personally don't think it is going far enough, and that's why I visually had to put pictures on in the book of what vaginal discharge looks like.
Yes.
Full of young women and girls at different points coming in going, I've got this discharge, should I be worried? And instantly thinking it's abnormal or it's a sexually transmitted disease, but also missing the fact that some of the discharge could be linked to sexually transmitted disease. And likewise, understanding what different blood looks like at different varying points in your cycle, but then understanding that if you start getting blood, say postmenopausally, so you've had 1 year 1 day without a period, and then you start bleeding, postmenopausal bleed isn't a good thing. You need to make sure that you get that looked at, because it could be linked to what's known as hyperplasia of the endometrial tissue, or could be linked to womb cancer. Now, in Black and Asian communities, particularly Black women that I speak to in my clinics, they will put off a bleed postmenopausally because they think, oh, it's okay, it's normal, I'm still ovulating as part of the cycle. Well, no, that's not. And so I wanted to make that sure that it came across. But also I wanted to show women that we are cyclical and hormonal and also ever-changing beings. Men just do one change, they have puberty and then that's it. Whereas women go through puberty years, fertility years, and then also menopausal years. But also our body changes so much with each pregnancy. So our bra size changes consistently. The fact that our shape changes, we get stretch marks and they're normal. And on the image where I show how to do a vulval examination, I had a lovely illustrator, Liliana, and she's put stretch marks and a roll on the belly. And when I put it out to the test market, honestly, the feedback was, oh my God, your models have stretch marks and they've got postnatally, she hasn't, snapped back and she's got a bit of a belly, or there's no gap between the thighs. Look, I have no gap between my thighs.
Me neither.
Exactly. Wanted to show normal bodies with the context of it being illustrated, but I hate the fact that we've got into these airbrushed ideas where you know, things have to be taken away, which are normal and beautiful. The fact that you've got your stretch marks are your tiger stripes. You know, own them, love them, because they are, your body is able to produce life, literally. And we forget how incredible our body is. And we forget that we are these cyclical individuals, and then changes happen on a hormonal level. And so the idea with this is to bring it back to just really celebrating, you know, women and girls that I come across in my clinics.
Oh yeah, and you see me looking down. I mean, I'm just looking at the most wonderful. You really sensitively and beautifully looking in terms of a transgender community. There's not a corner of this that you haven't shone a light into, which and honestly, it's really educating me, because if I'm really honest, Nighat, some of it frightens me out of not wanting to offend, not wanting to seem indifferent to it, but to wanting to really understand, because that's where we've backed ignorance away then, isn't it? You know, through our own understanding and sharing of that information. I mean, I love it. We've even got things like pubic lice in here, which I didn't think I'd see on a Monday morning. But that's amazing. And again, things like in those puberty years, understanding things about, you know, female condoms. We're sort of very much sold reductist narratives, aren't we, around contraception? Tell me, there was a dental contraception. There was something you'd said about oral sex, and I thought, I've got to ask her, what is that?
Yeah, so there's dental dam, which
Yes.
is a cover that you can put on if you have oral sex. So it's an idea is if you have multiple partners, even just one partner, it prevents sexually transmitted diseases through our oral sex. And that's the other thing. Younger people or older people, or actually lots of people in the mainstream, don't realize that you can get oral STDs. And so the dental dam is really important. Femidoms, the amount of young women that I've spoken to have said, I didn't know, I thought the only contraception was condoms and the pill. That was it. And I'm like, no, there's diaphragms, there's femidoms. And also I talk about different types of condoms as well. So there are ones that are porous, so sheepskin condoms, which there is also one, if you have a latex allergy, what you can do in regards to managing that as well. And I think that this is where the whole conversation about contraception is really vast, and we're not having enough of it. Likewise, when it comes to period products, I hate calling them sanitary or hygiene products. No, there's nothing about hygiene and linked to it. It's period products, and I've written all the different types of period products out there where you are. So when I started my periods, the first conversation I had was actually with my mother, and she gave me the thickest white, you know, these white thick pads. And I was about 15 when I realized, oh my goodness, there are pads with wings, and I don't need to get abrasions every month, and I can go and do like sports, etc. And I won't flood it into my underwear. And that was a game changer for me. So again, I try to, and also those that might want to think about moon cups, the amount of women, girls, or even dads who are like, I've never heard of what a moon cup is.
Can you describe how a moon cup works, just briefly, for people? Can you describe how it works?
So they are made out of different devices. Mostly they're going to be plastic, and essentially they come in different sizes as well. And a bit like a tampon, you press the moon cup, because they're flexible,
Right.
then you pop it up, and it goes around the cervix to collect the blood. You can have ones that collect low flow or even really high flow, and you would need to change it. Maybe actually it's less than a tampon, because there's no links to infections if you regularly change it. So every sort of 6 to 12 hours, we say that you change the moon cup, and then you decant the product or the blood into the toilet, give it a wash, and then you can use it again. And it's reusable, so you're not affecting the environment too much. I have a moon cup for when I'm on traveling, etc., because I've got a copper coil in and I bleed quite heavily, and it's the one thing that's stopped me from flooding. And I also use tampons as well. Moon cups are brilliant because, again, they are the substitute for tampons, environmentally, you know, less refill, going on to refill sites. But also you can go swimming with those in. So for me, that's another win-win. A lot of people don't like it. So the reason that some people don't like it is because, A, if you haven't got the shapes right, it can be quite sore and painful.
Yeah.
And especially had, say, an episiotomy scar, or you've got genitourinary syndrome of the menopause, or vaginal atrophy, and you've got dryness down below, or you've got a prolapse as well. Moon cups might not be that comfortable, but it's well worth trying. And you can if you go online and go to brook.org, which is a website, it's a contraceptive website, absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
Ask for free samples as well, so you can try it out before you buy them, because they are slightly pricey depending on which ones you get. I mean, I bought mine from Tesco's for about £8, which is not, you know, really that expensive considering I'm reusing it.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, that wasn't a thing for me. I didn't even know about that, but it's so brilliant. And that's the benefit of coming to see someone like yourself, isn't it? You know, the book is amazing, but actually it's also something that you probably either help reinforce or educate your own GP that actually these things are available. I really like the whole Wooker brand. So Wooker, so Ruby Route, which are, you know, I saw a brilliant advert on my way to this menopause conference, and it was in a service station, and it was right by the Tampax machine, but it's actually period wear, and it comes in all sorts of things integrated into shorts. You can have thongs. Who knew a thong with a period lining? I mean, absolutely brilliant. I wish I'd had more access to that myself. And so let's talk a little bit about the inequality, shall we? Because actually it's so important to use our voices in service of those who maybe don't or can't use their voice right now. I mean, can we talk a little bit about, from your experience, Nighat, the inequalities certainly that exist, particularly for Black, Asian, ethnic minorities when it comes to women's health? And pick any part of that you want to pick, because unfortunately it's in every part, isn't it?
It is, and I wanted to pick it out on my book, and I have done a lot of that. And the idea is to highlight the intersectionalities of inequalities. So when it comes to inequalities, I've now got to the point where I need to think broader. So that's why, you know, as a Muslim hijab-wearing woman, I made it my mission to put in trans health in there. Yeah. Those that are transitioning, say, from female to male, will still have periods, and they will still want to think about products and how to do that safely. That's why the period product section is so important. That's why talking about breast binding is so important, because they still need to be reminded to check their breasts, and whatever relationship that they might have with their organs and their body is really important to relay. I also talk about ADHD. So neurodiversity and hormonal changes is something that we are so behind on and so little known. Physical and mental disabilities, again, they impact us again with our body and with hormonal changes. The fact that in the deaf community in British Sign Language currently in 2023 we don't have a word for menopause is really shocking. And if you look at sort of those that have visual impairments, their navigations around the NHS are really difficult, because if we look at the guidelines, so let's get back to how we could practice medicine as clinicians in the NHS. All the guidelines, my belief is, and this might upset a lot of people, is that they are very white-centric for a person who has good English. So if they have English, which is not their first language, and they essentially don't have any form of other disability which is holding them back, will do really well. But actually, if you come from a Black, Asian, ethnic minority community where English is not your first language, say on top of that, you're from an LGBTQ trans community, say on top of that, you've got, say, a physical or a learning disability, or you're neurodiverse. Do you see how the inequalities just stack up and stack up and stack up? And so we find that those are the individuals that are then not actually covered and looked at within the clinical pathways, because I have 10 minutes as an NHS GP. We're also forgetting, on top of that, the economy changes. We've got a cost of living crisis. We assume everybody has access to a mobile phone, but we do have a lot of digital poverty. And then we just assume that everybody has time. We are really time poor on top of that. And so I think that when you're looking at women's health and health inequalities, it's just the wider the pool gets. So we're not looking for equality anymore. I think that that's really reductive, because that should be a given. What we're looking for is equity. The equity means that everybody is able to have access to healthcare in the way that it works for them, and at the position that it works for them as well. Because we know that women's healthcare is not one size fits all. We've said that, you and I, many times. We also know that there is no silver bullet for any aspect of women's healthcare which is going to be the quick fix and the short wins. However, the incredible thing is by building trust and listening to those people, those women and men from those intersectionalities, which are from marginalized communities, they will literally tell you what they want. They'll give you the quick wins. I'll give you an example. I worked with Somalian women in Tower Hamlets, and I went to a meeting and they said, Dr. Nighat, we are really struggling with Black and Asian women from Tower Hamlets to come and have their mammogram examinations. And then we dig down and I spoke to a lot of the community workers who are already doing a lot of work with those individuals, trying to gain awareness and education. And the women said, actually, we need to get the men to understand why we need mammograms as well, because them to look after our children or allow us to leave the house. That's in some cultures, there is this sort of, patriarchy, unfortunately, that plays a huge part, whether we agree with it or not. And so how do you get these men and women from a very reserved, conservative Somalian community to understand about mammograms? And it was actually the key workers within those communities who built trust and said, come to one of our workshops, Dr. Nighat. And so what we did was we made bread dough balls and put a frozen pea in there and got the men and the women to play with the dough balls, teach them how to examine the four quarters, understand that this is what a lump feels like in the breast. And this is why a woman would need to go for a mammogram. So the men are actively part of it. And do you know what? The men left far more educated, and they just said, oh my goodness, we're going to let all of our women and daughters understand. It's just we didn't know. We felt left out of this conversation. And breast is such a taboo subject. We don't even have a word for breast in our community. But also the women were like, we will look after each other. We will literally strap the kids onto our backs. We will look after them so she can go for her smear and her mammogram and what else. And I think that that's not hard to do. It doesn't require a lot of money to even do something like this, because if you ask the community, they will literally tell you what they want. We've just got to be receptive to it and let them do it, but learn from them and do it more. And that's where we need to get to with equity of healthcare for women's health.
Oh, amazing. Totally well said. I agree completely, because I did a podcast quite recently with a lady called Pamela Windle, and we talked about our dislike of findings from the SWAN study, because we didn't feel it really, it didn't really serve everyone in that equitable way. Yes, it came out with some interesting findings, but this is why it drives this need for us to understand what menopause, women's health, what it looks like in different parts of our society, doesn't it? And yes, actually, I think having that approach is so powerful, isn't it? A level playing field for everybody to learn in the same way, at the same time, in a safe place. Because these cultural norms have existed for such a long time. It's going to take time, isn't it, to sort of lift the veil on some of these things. And I do feel that corporate companies have more of a responsibility also, to think about how they can divest some of their profits back into the communities with which they're actually employing people, so that they could actually do more workshops, more information giving. Because that's what's going to ultimately help. Because we know, certainly with things, I can't remember the statistic, I had it marked up, but the amount of days, for example, that are lost for girls in education, we think that happens outside of the UK. It doesn't. It's happening in lots of environments, and particularly I know even when I was having my periods, there are lots of different cultural things that my mum would say to me about periods. Don't wash your hair, don't do this, don't do that, and so we've got a long way to go, I think, to try and understand what it's like for people to exist within this healthcare dynamic and to navigate lots of these things. But I absolutely love that. So I know you're doing so much project work, aren't you? Tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing, particularly with Wellbeing of Women, and like you mentioned, groups that you're looking at, particularly in the Asian and Black intersection. So what are you doing? What are you up to?
I wanted to quickly touch upon that, because you're absolutely right. We think about women's health as women, but we forget about the girls. And we know that 13% of girls in the UK lose a day a month from school because of their period and pain and issues around that. We know that there is more money that we spend on, say, period products because of the tampon tax that we have, which is a catchy phrase, but there's serious implications. And we also know that cultural aspects such as washing your hair, not being able to touch food, not allowed to go to the mosque, also infringes on the woman's concept of what her body is doing, as seeing that she's unclean. And those conversations we need to pick apart with scientific evidence to say there is nothing to do with cleanliness if you're on your period. And I think that we forget the fact that it's society and the patriarchy, and unfortunately medical misogyny plays a huge part. And the reason medical misogyny plays a huge part is because historically, even in medicine, what we've done is we've used men's data and just said, oh yeah, women are little men, and then this is exactly how they would behave. So for example, heart attack signs or stroke signs, which are different in women, are never really fully explored, and they're missed. And so women actually still, the biggest killer for them is actually cardiovascular disease. But if you even drill that down even further, it goes into how we do data in Black and Asian communities. I'm the Imam's daughter. I've grown up in a mosque, live in a mosque, speak to the women in the mosque, because women speak in places of safety. In Punjabi and Urdu, we don't have words for menopause. We have really derogatory, horrible words, which aren't worth repeating. And in Arabic, actually, when you come to perimenopause or menopause, the direct translation of the Arabic word is the age of despair. I mean, that is how would women even have that conversation? And then you look at research, because women will only tell symptoms if they think they're significant enough. I remember my mother having a really florid hot flush in front of me, bear in mind her daughter's a doctor. And I said, Mum, you're having a hot flush. And she, that's linked to menopause. And she goes to me, no, darling, white women get menopause. And I was like, oh my goodness, how would you even think that? And she goes, yeah, because where is the data to say that this is the impact that we have? So the first study that we had was the SWAN study, but it looks at American women. So we need to make sure that we increase the data and looking at research in Black and Asian women. And that is even further into other period problems. For example, PMDD, which is methoric disorder. I cover that in my book quite extensively. But the data, there is only one study, Amantha, which is done on Black women in America in 2011, which looks at PMDD in Black women. And get this, they did a questionnaire and asked Black women in the university whether they get symptoms of PMDD. Of course, periods, mental health is such a taboo in Black and Asian communities that in the questionnaire, they all tick, no, we don't get it. So the research and the data which they published said PMDD doesn't happen in Black and Asian women. And you're like, did you not think that this is actually a shoddy bit of research? And that's the only research that we've done. So at the moment, if you look at our medical textbooks, it seems to indicate that only white women get PMDD. And so Black women get a misdiagnosis of, say, bipolar, or they get a diagnosis of premenstrual tension, or at worst, they get fobbed off and told that it's all in their head and it's not real and they need to go on antidepressants. So the work that I've been doing is to tackle some of that. In the last 2 years, because I've got prominence on social media, I hate using that word because I don't think I am that prominent, but because of my work at looking at marginalised community, being a woman from a marginalised community, having access to the healthcare system that I also work for as well, lots of groups in and around the country started reaching out to me. So what I did was I thought, you know what, I'm going to map the work that they're doing everywhere from, say, Manchester, Newcastle, Inner Tower Hamlets to Wales to sort of Birmingham. And mapping these groups, I was able to see that these are communities who felt that the NHS, or the Department of Health in particular, has let them down. The pandemic, COVID, was fundamentally a time when marginalised communities felt utterly let down. There were more deaths from COVID within Black and Asian marginalised communities hit by poverty, than any other groups. And yes, I know that we were all in the same pandemic, but we all had different sized boats, and we were all sort of, in various different comfort at that time. So what the community groups did was that they upskilled themselves and decided, right, I'm going to go out and, literally provide care because there's trust. So we formulated on September the 20th this year, something called the Health Collective, where I got all of these marginalised communities together so that we could then tackle what the issues are in regards to the barriers that they face, the issues around trust with mainstream healthcare and the Department of Health, and the fact that they feel that they are always telling the Department of Health what they need. and either they're not listened to, or either what they request is never done. So the doing bit doesn't happen. So it was a really informative meeting. My report is going to be published soon, so I'm going to share that with you and everybody else. And I think that would be key and fundamental to know what marginalised groups are doing. The mapping is continuing, so we've got more groups on board and getting them to work in harmony under the collective. And the reason it's housed at the Wellbeing of Women is because when Department of Health were very excited and they said, oh my goodness, we'll take this over, the shareholders and the groups that are part of the Health Collective declined and said no, because we've been let down so badly and we don't want them to take over because nothing will happen. So currently it's housed under the charity Wellbeing of Women. And the idea is that, say, Amantha, you come to me, or somebody from your corporate company comes to me and says, we want to do a bit of research to find out what South Asian women in Birmingham, inner Birmingham, what their views are on cervical screening. I can go, I know exactly the group who are working with those, they've got the trust, and here is their contact details, and go and do that bit of work with them. And likewise, we cannot clump marginalised groups in one thing. We're not a monolith or one variant. We've all got our nuances. Black communities are very different to South Asian communities, to say Nepalese communities, to say Inner Tower Hamlet communities, to say the Jewish community is very different to the Muslim community. So the idea is that if you said to me, Amantha, Nighat, I want to get through to also Orthodox Jewish women about their menopausal experiences, because actually they don't have access to phones because their rabbi has said that, you know, being linked into technology is not a great thing, so they aren't, and they still do things by, you know, post, etc. I can be like, right, Stamford Hill, I know exactly the group that you need to speak to, this is where you go, because we've mapped them, and that's the Health Collective.
Oh my, that is so it's inspiring, and it's hope giving, isn't it? Because I think sorry.
And I was going to say, and it's crazy that it's not been done before to this level. We've got our own councils who know sort of partly what's happening, but actually not even, I realised by doing this work that not even all the councils know exactly the groups that are working in their area, because again, people have lost trust with their councils, so they're just doing it. So and word of mouth is really how we're doing a lot of the mapping, by the groups that are already on board, going even further into places of poverty, places of digital poverty, and working with them to feed back to us. And I think that this is all built on trust. It's the first of its kind in our country.
Oh, it's amazing. And already my mind's sort of whirring. I mean, I live in Devon, where we don't have a dedicated centre for menopause. Our nearest centre is in, I think, the next county over in Somerset. And so I hear lots of stories. Quite recently, someone approached me, a gentleman approached me when I was talking about menopause at a higher education facility, and said, actually, we're doing something in our local mosque. Is there something you can do to support us? And I can well imagine people just go, do you know what, I'm fed up of asking for some help, we just do it all in-house. And so it maybe isn't advertised. I mean, my mind's already thinking, is that information going to be publicly available, so that actually if Amantha did move to Birmingham, I would be able to know where that community was? A Wellbeing of Women going to sort of make that public?
Yes, it will be, because we're working with our shareholders at the moment, because there is sort of privacy of the information that we've got to think about as well. But also there'll be a section on the Wellbeing of Women website where people can then log into to find out more about the Health Collective. We need to get a bit more funding. So we've got some lottery funding in order to get an Instagram and a Facebook page, because again, we've got to get somebody who's able to run that for us. So we need another person employed as part of the charity. The charity is run by literally 4 women. We're a very, very small charity, and jobbing doctors like me, where I'm also working as a clinician in the NHS. So it is something that requires a lot of thought process, but absolutely it will be a public place, because the document that's come out is going to be a public document. So somebody like you, Amantha, or your corporate company clients can have a look to see what marginalized communities want. And I'm not just talking about Black and Asian. You know, in the mapping, we've got Jewish communities, Muslim communities, we've got LGBTQ+, because I'm really keen not to miss those communities who are traditionally, unfortunately, well, forgotten about. Let's put it honestly, they are forgotten about.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, just mentioning our colleague Joyce Harper, I just put something back. I looked at what is the definition of South Asian. Well, I educated myself because that people includes people from Afghanistan. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, and then we take Southeast Asian, you know, so we've sort of reduced it all down to sort of Asian, Black people. But you're right, even in that narrative, we're forgetting all these other tendrils that go out from that. So I think it's hugely enormous. And again, I think there's a place where corporates can actually put some of their social responsibility fund towards things like this, and I think that's a narrative I would be quite happy to take forward, because the reality is, yeah, because well, the reality is that there's a, you know, we know a lot of these industries have a lot of resources available to them. I don't think they necessarily appreciate they could be utilizing them in this way.
So this is a real plea from this podcast to those corporate companies who are listening through, and anyone who's listening. If you know of a community grassroots organisation that's doing work with marginalised communities, please get in touch with Wellbeing of Women. And our next meeting is going to be held in January once the report is released. And I think, Amantha, an invitation is definitely going to be coming to you as well.
Thank you.
We'd love for you to be there. We need to make sure that we have, individuals who are invested, such as yourself, and doctors, because there's lots of doctors who are working with marginalised communities, and then the communities themselves as well. Definitely. So there's going to be two strands to the collective. So there'll be the doctors like myself, you know, individuals who care. There's also Dr. Aziza, Dr. Philippa Kay. So there's quite a lot of us involved in that. Joyce Harper. And then obviously the groups themselves that are doing the work. So we've got their CEOs or the leaders of the groups, and then they will then filter out to all the community workers that they deal with in their patch or their area, and then obviously the women that they serve. So the idea is that there is this constant dialogue of accurate medical information. Your knowledge of workplace menopause is invaluable to, say, some groups from Black communities who want to give that education from you and pass that on to the women in their area. And that's the idea of the collective, as well as then trying to, when we get right down to writing the clinical pathways for the women's health strategy, because it's a 10-year strategy, then we're not scrambling around, and the pathways aren't just going to be yet again white-centric. They're going to be incorporating equitable, marginalised communities, because we've actually been watching what they're doing over time.
Oh, I love that. I'm so excited, genuinely.
That's the hope. It just requires all of us to pull in the right direction. And you know, it's been a real difficulty. In our first meeting alone, firstly, it took me 2 years to try and just get all the groups together. The trust and the belief that it works for them, because I'm relying on people to give up their free time, and time is so expensive, and they're doing already stuff on top of full-time jobs. And then lastly, we've got to tackle loads of issues such as racism within our communities, homophobia, anti-Semitism, world politics. I mean, in the first meeting, some of the Black community groups, they said to me, and everybody in the meeting with Dame Leslie Regan there, that the reason that they find it really hard to speak to South Asian communities is because actually they don't get racism from white people, they get racism from South Asian people. And the colorism is awful, that they find it really hard to speak. So, you know, Black Muslim communities find it really hard to speak to, say, Pakistani Indian Muslim communities. And I hadn't realized that those sort of interplay is what's happening. I sort of had, but I think that the level of gaslighting that happens within communities, and the level of racism or the classism, which we don't talk about enough, still needs to be tackled. I'm always reminded of class, because we both know Carolyn Harris, the MP, Swansea MP in Wales. And Carolyn is this lovely, vibrant character. And she does head up quite a constituency where there's a lot of deprivation, and it's really varied as well. And Caroline said to me that she was having a meeting with her constituents, and she took a few moments and just poised herself and just said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just having a menopausal hot flush." and somebody in the audience, another woman, said to her, "Oh, you're posh." There is this concept that talking about periods and talking about menopause is very much something that posh people do.
How funny. That is so funny. I love that story. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah,
Exactly.
I shall remember the next time I have one. I
And
mean,
that is to say of downplaying women by going, Carolyn Harris is, I would say, the most vocal, but she said, we had a giggle about it because she goes, it's still very much visual, as a menopause moment is something reserved for very posh white women.
yeah.
And I said, that's where we are. So we've got so much to do, but I'm really, really excited for 2024 because we're heading at least in the right direction.
Exactly. It just feels to me, Nighat, that the trajectory has changed, definitely in these last couple of years. And I think representation matters so much. I honestly don't feel, or haven't felt, in the first 10 years of my perimenopause, I didn't see anyone like me talking about it. I was the only person in my friendship circle talking about it. In fact, I stopped talking about it because I thought, actually, they all just think I'm, crazy or something. But I became obsessional about it. I became obsessional about advocating for myself. And I think it's that, isn't it? We know there's so much more to do. And I think we'll go further faster if we all go together, because we've got lots of people doing lots of different things, haven't we? But actually pooling all that energy, because a lot of us are doing repetitive work, when in fact, actually, if we put it all into one vessel and then disseminate it, that's going to be so much more helpful, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I can't, Dame Leslie Regan and I echo this. We will go further and faster together if we do work together and we don't worry about credit. The Health Collective is not mine. It's my shareholders. I just started the mapping exercise and I just came up with the fact that we needed to do this so all the marginalised communities aren't working in silos and we can learn from each other. But also that representation is so important. And I hadn't appreciated how much it was until I started doing BBC Breakfast and ITV this morning. I started in the pandemic from my kitchen where I'm sat right now, and it was like Middle England woke up to the fact, oh my God, there's a woman with a hijab knowing about vaccines and periods and public health messages, and she's not going to bake us a cake. I mean, what's going on? This is absolutely... And having meetings, once there was sort of this interest going, oh, your hijab is just a bit too much, or your face just doesn't fit what we're looking for, or your name is a bit ethnic. Would you mind changing it? I think it was a point where they wanted to say, I should have like a stage name like Nina, Nina Arif is easy to pronounce because Nighat is so difficult. And I think sticking to guns and going, no, actually, if I siphon bits off myself, I remove my hijab, I change my name, I'm not sat in my kitchen where I normally would do. What bits of me would you change again and again? Because I think that's the whole narrative of women, right? And anybody that wants to be seen or heard, we will change you and whitewash you to fit the aesthetic that we're happy with because you're much more palatable in that respect. And you have to really be confident and stand your ground and go, no, my ancestors would be so disappointed if I let go of my family name, if I change, if, because well, regardless of what I change, if I change my nose, if I get my boobs bigger, if I wear different clothes, you will still never be happy as a society. So, but the one person I can make happy is myself, and I won't change anything about me. And I'm really proud to say that I had incredible individuals in my corner. I think women who are incredibly powerful. I mean, Naga Minchetti is a dear friend, but she's incredibly powerful corner. She bolsters me, and she was like, never change who you are and what you represent. And so for me, as a hijab wearing Muslim woman, to bring out a book full of vulvas is really radical, even in my household, and they know that I do this work. I brought the book home and I gave it to my mother because I was so excited, and I showed it to her. So my mother was sitting at one end of the room, my father was at the other end at the sofa. And I said, my dad was just happy with the cover and the fact that it said Arif on it, because I never changed my maiden name to my married name. I was just so excited. And my mother opened it up to, I think it's the 7th or 8th page, which is the black vulva. And she looked at it and she just went, in Punjabi, the only way, Punjabi mothers know how to explain things, she goes, "Tunu hor kuch nahi milya karne vaste," which is literally translated as, you couldn't find anything else to do.
That is brilliant. I love that. I love that. Oh, that's brilliant. Oh,
and he was just, there was that the other day. And my father goes, let me see, I want to see what's in the book. And my mother just went to closed it, and she went, "It's not for your eyes."
That is, and I think what's so lovely is that you're making a bridge for cultural generations, aren't you? You still have one of your beautiful feet very much rooted in your cultural heritage, but you are also very firmly balancing your foot in the other world that we exist in, because actually, I'm a child from a mixed marriage, growing up in 70s Britain. It was really hard, carry a lot of battle scars from that time, I do believe, and I think that representation piece is so important. It is so important, and the fact that you weren't willing to change who you are. I see so many people editing themselves, Nighat, in all my work, and I think it's sad. We edit ourselves because of the social media pressure. So our conversation has come full circle, really, which is that our young people are under the pressure of social media, but so are women throughout all stages of their life. We're increasingly under the pressure of social media. And I suppose this is a call to action, not to edit yourself into obscurity, but to come out of the shadows, come into the light. Nighat talks about the light a lot, which I absolutely love. So, I'm grateful you haven't changed who you are, because that's exactly who we see. And you are your image is so iconic in that way. And I know when I sat down next to you at a meeting, all a little bit starstruck, I have to say, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I sat next to Dr. Nighat. I've just lucked out. And you said to me, own your space at the table. Never apologize, and that stayed with me. And I think it's that, isn't it? We have that capacity to use our voices, use our platforms, and if we don't edit ourselves too much for the benefit of others, I think that's the best that we can do, isn't it, to bring people on this journey with us?
Absolutely. Wear the biggest hijab, the biggest dress, smile, and talk your truth, and stay grounded. I hope I haven't changed, and I hope I never change, but I think that you can't, people always have to have different personas for different roles. But when we first met, it was like, I was the same, I hope it was to me, to both of us, it was like, oh, we're exactly the same people online as we are sat having a glass of water and a conversation about menopause here. And I think those genuine individuals are real sort of pieces of gold in our society, and we should be clinging on to them, because gold is incredibly rare. It's formulated by a lot of pressure, and those individuals are able to withstand that pressure and come out still shining and bright, are the people that I want in my circle, and the people I want at my table to educate me and give me their knowledge.
Oh, that's so lovely. Well, there's no better ending to a podcast, quite honestly, than that. So I will have left that last word to you. But if I did to ask you just one thing, Nighat, if you can gaze into the future a little bit, okay, and let's say 5 years from now, what is your hope for women in the next 5 years? I mean, if you were to manifest something, what would you want to manifest?
I have 3 things that I have as a manifestation in the future.
Okay.
One is that I carry on doing my clinical work, because I adore being a doctor. Yeah. I never want to leave my clinical surgery and my patients, so I'd love to do that. Secondly, I think that the conversations around women's bodies, the narrative changes, and we are at the start of it. I know we've always had starts from the 60s and the 70s and stuff, but now the Gen Z generation are the ones that I'm looking to, because they are really unapologetically themselves, and I love that, and I want to learn from the Gen Z so much. And then thirdly, I think that women in all their representation, all marginalised communities, should be visibly seen and heard. And as you were saying, editing is something that I think we can never get away from. People will do, but acceptance of everybody, because the thing that binds us is finding the human in every person. Take away my hijab, my titles, my work with the UN, my book, I hope that the only thing that people remember me for is the fact that I was a human and cared about humanity, and there was a level of kindness that I tried to do that with. I actually don't care about awards or getting the best this or the best that, or, you know, an honourship of this. Actually, it means very little, because at the end of it, I think when 9-year-old Nighat came to the UK off Heathrow in a summer skirt, pouring down in rain and flip-flops, I would love it if, say, another generation says, oh, I looked at Dr. Nighat's clinical work and now I've changed my narrative about my body ever so slightly. And, you know, thank you that she did it in a way of kindness. And that's it. That's the winner for me, and I'll die happy.
Oh, I find that really moving, because I think everybody's inner child, you know, we sort of still carry that around. I said to you before, you know, I sort of at this mid stage in my life, I'm 52, I'm doing a bit of reframing is how I look at it. I'm reframing quite a bit of my life. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I think if any of us feel like that, it's perfectly natural to feel like that, and to feel like maybe you want things to be different. I think what we get with your book is the courage to actually sit down. I told you I'm going to sort of take my book into a circle of women, and I was very kindly gifted a book, and that's going to my local school. In fact, I would actually challenge everybody, why not buy a copy and take it to your local school? If you have the means to do that, that would be an absolute gift for a generation of people, that someone who maybe can't find their voice could go and pick a book up from the library. I think I might put that on my show notes actually as a call to action. I think anybody who reads it on LinkedIn, and we've got about 8,000 followers, should actually buy a copy and put that somewhere in a community space that people will find it, pick it up and use it. So I think
I would love that, because I donated a bunch of my books to say food banks, because then they can read it and bring it back, and also 3 generations in a household that can have access to information
amazing.
as well. It's gone in my local library. I did a talk at my local library as well for free recently. And schools is my next aim. And there's some lovely people up and down the country, teachers who brought my book. But also Christmas is coming up, and we are so sometimes commercial, but actually we need to start thinking about our bodies. And it was done on purpose. I probably had the worst business plan that I put everything in one book. But essentially, you know, you just need to spend once, and then that's it, and it'll last you a lifetime.
Absolutely. And it's available. It's just about available everywhere, isn't it, Nighat?
Have been my biggest supporter, so I'm really grateful, because, you know, a health book is not something you would see in Tesco's per se, but especially a women's health book. So I'm really thankful to them. It's been #1 on Amazon. It's in Waterstones. I think it was #4 on all book sales on Amazon. So it's getting the sort of out there. I mean, it's not a flash in the pan. I completely understand that. It's not everybody's cup of tea. And I'm not like the mega superstar celebs out there that people will instantly know by looking at the name who it is. And so it's a slow burner, but I'm so passionate about it, because it took me 2 years to write. It's 10 years of my clinical knowledge, and it's evidence-based, and I don't know what more people could want from, like, I know that it's literally long nights, long days, writing, re-editing, getting the pictures right, and so it's literally been, it's like having a 4th baby. If anyone wants to write a book, come and talk to me, because writing books is so hard.
well, this is it, and you know, that's the point about it all, isn't it? Is that you've done it in that spirit of giving, because actually, if you do have the knowledge as a woman, or someone with female biology, or, you know, transgender community, wherever you are in your body, this is going to be of benefit. So for single parents, dads, fathers bringing up girls, anybody, I would say just go flick through it. Go, you know, Waterstones is great. You plonk yourself on the floor and go and look through all the books. But it is absolutely wonderful, and like I say, this is my go-to, and I'm so happy to give it to the girls in my circle, the young emerging brilliant women that, who knows, Nighat, will grow up inspired and want to do more like you. My daughter loves this book. I mean, I can't give you any higher praise than that. I mean, she's, you know, so someone who's 17, Doesn't
That's
get much
so
better.
my mother, I don't think really understood what I was trying to do. And then I did a book signing and I took her along with me so she could get a sense of it. And now she's immensely proud. But there was another Pakistani Muslim woman who brought my book and she excitedly waited in the line. And she turned to my mother and she said, in Punjabi, "This is your daughter's Sadaqah Jariyah." Now, anyone who's Punjabi and Muslim will understand that. So Sadaqah Jariyah is basically the gift of the knowledge, but it's a blessing. Oh. And it's a really important thing. And I always say that we should never keep any knowledge that we have to ourselves. So anyone listening to this podcast, if you know anything that you think your community can benefit from and learn from, please don't be shy and hide behind taboo and think it has to be under the veil or it's too embarrassing, because guaranteed people will learn from you. We are the sum of our mistakes and our missed opportunities. And I have made mistakes. I have missed opportunities. I have really missed diagnoses and learned about women's health because I never had it. And so then I thought, oh my goodness, I need to be able to give back to the women in my community, and so that their Sadaqah Jariyah can carry on. And whether we like it or not, women are nurturers. And I always say, if the woman's well, the household is well. So we have another saying in our culture that if you give a woman a bag of seeds and a bit of soil, she'll grow you an orchard. And that's exactly what I hope to do with this book, to have healthy women who look after the men and the men look after the women, who look after their sons. So I'm a mother to 3 boys, and I want my sons to understand me when I've lost my marbles and know atrophy. She needs a vaginal estrogen. But also that we pay forward and we pay forward, and that is embedded in humanity.
Lovely. Oh my gosh, I can see why the UN and various people, you are such a brilliantly articulate, advocating human being, Nighat. I feel immense pleasure to know you, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to give up your time on, which is so scarce. It comes at an absolute premium for you, so thank you so much. If people want to follow you, and why wouldn't they? I'll put all your socials there, but what is the quickest way for people to get more of you, Nighat? Where is the quickest way for people to get to you?
So I make lots of educational health content on my TikTok, and I then put it on my Instagram, so at Dr Nighat Arif. I'm also on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or as known as X now, and Threads, and YouTube. I'm trying to increase my YouTube channel because I make content in Punjabi and Urdu as well as English as well. And so I'm trying to increase that. But if anybody wants to ask me questions, no questions off limit, or talk to me, hopefully my book will answer a lot of them. But if you leave me a DM in my Instagram or contact me, then I try and pick up a lot of my messages. And if I can't answer directly, I try and make content around that question, because I can't give personalized medical advice on my socials. That's not safe. But if you wanted to have a question answered, then I try and make some content around that. Just bear with me, because it's work.
It's work, exactly. And she's swimming, and you're doing all sorts of things. I love the fact that you're pushing the dial on your own life, which is absolutely brilliant. You're an absolute inspiration. And in fact, I even have been at my local leisure centre again. How do I get some one-to-one swimming lessons, please? So honestly, I'm obsessed by watching you, because I sort of think, she's like leading. I'm happy to follow. So keep doing what you're doing. You're loving your swimming, aren't you?
I love it. Do you know, okay, I nearly drowned when I was about 7 years old in Pakistan. And so I remember that. And I remember this huge hand just grabbing me. And it was my uncle who grabbed me out of the canal and the water and saved my life, essentially. Since then, my mother was petrified of water. And then we came over to the UK, and the school laid on free swimming sessions. But my mother would always keep me at home because she didn't want me to be in a swimming costume. And at that time, Baywatch was quite famous.
Oh, yes.
Instead, she thought her daughter was going to be in a red swimming costume like Pamela Anderson. I mean, boobs. Pamela Anderson is gorgeous. So she let me go. And this sort of fear of water and my body and being on display just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And about 2 years ago, as we came out of the pandemic, Prof. Greg White and my team at Her Spirit, Holly and Mel, we were sitting around having a coffee, and he said to me, "We live on an island." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, we do live on an island." And he goes, "That we eat amount of swimmers." And it was off the back of a tragic drowning case that had happened at one of the beaches in England. And he said that the biggest group of people who don't swim are Black and Asian ethnic minorities. And if you go to the Caribbean, although that's an island as well, but the Black children don't know how to swim. And it really dawned on me that as a mother who's constantly going on about knowledge and sharing knowledge, actually doesn't teach her children, her boys, how to swim. I took them to the swimming pool, and the three of them sat on the side and bawled their eyes out and cried. And because it was the pandemic, the instructors can't get in with the children. So I thought, I'm going to have to put my big girl pants on. And I did. I put my bikini on and got into the pool with armbands and noodles, and then watched copious amount of YouTube videos. And 18 months on, I'm an independent swimmer, albeit in the slow lane. And I go about 4 times a week now.
And you went this morning and you put a post on LinkedIn because it was like hard to do it. But again, full circle, here you are saying to people, this is a time of renewal. It's about discovering. It's maybe bringing some of the things that you think you've left behind in the past and get stuck into them. That is brilliant, Nighat. Honestly, I don't think you realise just how, I mean, you need to poll people. How many people have started swimming this week, you know, as a result of you? I mean, it's brilliant. I've even Googled that watch that you're wearing.
Do you know, I post those because everyone says to me, I can't exercise because of this, and we build up so many barriers, and I completely empathize with that. And I have lots of barriers, and you know, sometimes I'll even be honest and say it's been a week since I've been able to get into the pool, but this is my first swim, and I've only managed to do 400 meters. So I'm really, really honest about the ugly sides of trying to get exercise into your routine, because it's a mission, and you have to diarize it. And this morning I was meant to be in the pool at 6:30 because that's usually when I go just before I have to do work. And unfortunately I overslept. And so I woke up at 7 o'clock, half an hour later, and I thought, no, I'm going to do this. Even if it's 15 minutes, I'll do a dip. I ended up doing 30 minutes, which is brilliant. But I hated every second of it. Like, I'm honest, I was in the pool.
Was it angry swimming?
Angry. I was in the pool and I was swearing to myself. Like my head wasn't in the water. And there's another woman, a really lovely woman, Jo, who's 85, who comes and she keeps telling me, you know, she's sort of taught me how to swim, but she was like, head in the water, pretend you're a dolphin, pretend you're gliding. And I was just angry swimming. So I got out the pool and I was like, oh, I've done it now.
Yep, right, that's it. You were a shark today. You're a shark. That's amazing. Well, listen, thank you so much. We just really wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully next year. But yeah, everybody, one last show. It's not the knowledge. What a beautiful book written by someone who is so giving. So thank you for now, Nighat, and we'll see you again.
Everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.